All right, what's happening, everybody? Happy Wednesday. At least I hope it's Wednesday. My name is Kevin, and I'm with coreMEDIA here. Thank you for joining us. I think we're going to have a lot of fun today. Um, Good afternoon to everybody on the East Coast, and good morning to everybody on the West Coast. So let's go ahead and get started here. Today I've got with me my constituent Patrick Oates and Jim Yakabuski. So, gentlemen, how are y'all doing this afternoon?
Very well.
Doing great, Kevin. Having a great
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I think this is a good way to pass the time. Just chatting about audio gear and some of Jim's experiences. And for those of y'all who don't know Jim, I'm sure you saw in the keynote, he's worked with some, you know, some medium to small level artists. Totally joking. He's worked with some of the biggest names in the industry for over coming up on 40 years, right, Jim?
Coming up, yeah, next year will be 40.
God, man, time flies, right? That's incredible. So without further ado, we've got about an hour and a half here to kind of chit chat back and forth, and we will have some time for questions. So if you guys have any questions, make sure you drop them in the chat. If you're watching on YouTube, they're over on the right side. If you're watching on mobile, they'll be on the left side if you're in landscape mode, or if you're in portrait, they'll be scroll on the bottom. So let's go ahead and kick it off here, and I'm going to kick Jim the first question, and that is just tell us a little bit about yourself, your musical background, and how did you become a sound engineer?
All right. Well, I am a Canadian. I'm from Vancouver area. Grew up in Aldergrove, Abbotsford, Cranbrook, BC, most of my school years. And
Was that all one city?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It was it was a very long name, and they split it up into several. But
I love it.
yeah, so yeah, I graduated from high school in Cranbrook and moved back to Vancouver to dive into recording school. And I was really not much of a musician as a younger person. I took 6 years of piano in middle school, high school, but I would never really call myself much of a musician. But I always had an ear for hearing things in songs and feeling like I could do that. I could mix a record, or I could mix a concert. So I went to recording school thinking that was the road I wanted to go. And then a friend of mine was a singer in a band from Cranbrook. He came out and auditioned for a band. I drove him to that meeting. He got hired. And on the way out the door, I said, hey guys, I'm going to recording school. So if you need a sound guy, I'm your guy. And 2 weeks later, I was on the road with absolutely not a clue what I was doing. But off I went, and that started that.
Wow, talk about drinking from a fire hose, huh?
Oh my gosh, the first night was absolutely tragic, and that we would have to have a beverage in our hand to tell that story. So we'll save that for another time.
Well, I'm ready. I'm kidding.
Yeah, but I was talking with someone the other day, and sometimes the best way to really learn is just getting out there and figuring it out. Because you can go to class all day long, and there's some great schools in this country that teach live audio. But even though they can teach you everything under the sun, at some point something's going to come up, and you're going to be like, I don't know what to do with this, and then you just got to kind of just start tearing stuff, ripping stuff out until you figure it. That's the best way to do it.
Yeah. Well, anyone who was in the bar that night in Vancouver did not agree that was the best way for me to become an audio engineer. But no, I definitely learned a ton and had so much help along the way. I was just telling my son the other day, about 3 weeks into being a sound guy, we were playing at this absolutely horrible bar in sort of northern British Columbia, and went down the street on one of our breaks to the fun club, to the cool club. And I walked in the door and I heard a mix. I heard thumping low end and crystal clear vocals and
just got your blood moving.
And I said, man, that's it. That's obviously what I don't have. So went to the front of house guy and said, I'm up the street. Would you please come and spend some time with me tomorrow and tell me what's wrong with everything I'm doing. So he did. And that was the very first in a long line of people who have contributed, helped out. And that kind of gives me a heart for teaching as well.
Absolutely. That's awesome. So moving into, I guess, straight up the nerd talk here, but like when it comes to gear, like what helps you shape your gear choices for live audio, and then what have you currently been mixing on, like in the interim here lately?
Well, when it comes to a mixing board, there's just so many great choices now. I mean, it used to be just this slew of analog consoles that were all great, all sounding really good. And then we got into digital world, and it was, there was some stuff that didn't sound great in the beginning, but there's so many consoles out there now that just really sound nice. So I think a lot of it has to do with workflow and, what are you comfortable on? I remember when the Avid Profile and the D Show and stuff came out, that seemed to be like the most analog workflow of anything that had come along. So I think that's part of why people like that so much. Plus, using your Avid plugins all over the place. That was
I'll never forget. I went to a show at the House of Blues in New Orleans right when the Profile had come out, and I'd been using Pro Tools for a while. And when I walked at front of house, I was like, "Is he using Bomb Factory on the snare drum right now?" And then I started using that, and then that became like the number one for. I mean, they're still all over the place, over the place.
Yeah, I mean, that console made a huge mark for sure, and. But Digico is so solid, such a great brand. I use several of their different platforms. Mix a lot on a SD5, and then last year I took out a SSL, the L550 on Frampton. And people who know me know that I'm a sort of analog-y, nuts and bolts guy, not a lot of plugins and all that kind of stuff. Just sort of straight ahead signal path, gain knob, high pass, fader up, And so if the preamp in the console sounds really good, that's such a great start for me. That's really just all I'm looking for. 80% of what I'm looking for in a console is that. And then the other side of gear choices that, is the speaker system. I mean, I really think, honestly, that, speakers are such a huge part of the final outcome. And,
Massive, yeah.
Yeah. Again, we have all these great speaker companies, speaker brands. Everything sounds so much better than it did 10 years ago. And, and so, you really can't go wrong. I think a lot of it has to do with, the platform, the signal processing, how quickly can you fly it? How much room does it take up? How heavy is it? All that stuff. But as far as sonically, the way you can shape the PA, predict how accurate is the prediction software, and how much can you sort of be mobile and flexible when the elements change and you got to quickly change stuff in the PA. How flexible is the processing software? But I did want to say too, as far as so those are all great big consoles, and I haven't really got to play much with a big Allen and Heath console, but I have been blessed by you guys and Mr. Oates down there at the bottom of my screen. I've been really having a blast with the D-Live platform. I got the C1500 here at my house, which Patrick, you'll get it back eventually.
Take as much time as you need, man.
But it is so fun, and it sounds great, and it's super easy to get around, and I'm having a blast. So I basically have made a mix of every band that I've worked for in the last 10, 15 years. Anyone I have a multi-track for, I have a mix pulled up on this little desk now, and it's really a lot of fun. So yeah,
it's good. I know I saw your last video where you were doing the stems talking about dueling guitars, and I saw your Frampton video, and both of those were great. And then I was showing them to a coworker, and they were like, "He can do that much on 12 faders." I'm like, "Well, yeah." And then we dive into it, but that's always everyone's first kind of like knee jerk reaction. They're like, "I can't do anything on that. It's way too small, way too small."
Yeah.
But then you start diving into it, and you've had all this time at your house to kind of see what it can do, and it can hold its weight, which is great.
Yeah.
And it's a great tool, especially for engineers that are home, and they don't want to have to go rent a U-Haul to pull behind their car, and then get an Easy Tilt and deck a console in their living room, and their wife's like, "What are you doing?" I know I needed a new mixer, but I was talking about a KitchenAid. I'm sure everyone's seen that meme. But no, that's super cool. So, but the mixing console is one thing, but back to the PA. I know talking with you last week, PA is a big part of what you look for in sound quality. And I know you mentioned some PAs, and you talked about how passionate you were about tuning the room. So given that, sonic quality is an attribute, what are like your favorite PAs to mix on? I know we talked about the different software for the PA and everything, but like general thing, like when you walk into a room, what just makes you grin ear to ear when you're like, "Yes, I get to mix on this today"?
Yeah. Well, I must say, I mean, I have been lucky enough to work with many audio companies, and their preferred PAs, whether it be Meyer or JBL or Claire, it's. I don't think anyone would think it's a secret that I love L Acoustics stuff just a little more than everything else. But it just, that to me is, put it up in the air, follow the rules, implementing it into the room properly with prediction software and all that. And then, you turn it on with the stock preset, and it just starts in a great place,
Mm-hmm. That's good. So we've covered a little bit of the surface of consoles, talked a little bit about PA. Let's dive in further to the console, specifically regarding plugins. This is like a very hot topic. Everybody wants to know what plugins, do you have? What plugins do you use? Waves has, so many plugins, and people end up narrowing it down to like their top 3 or 4 or 5. Like regarding, Waves, UA, what's kind of your go-tos with plugins?
Yeah. Like I said, I don't use a lot. I try to generally just make it happen on the console first if I can.
Yeah, it's great.
And yeah, I mean, I've been that.
Can I ask why?
What's that?
So can I ask why?
Sure. Well, back in the profile days, as I was mentioning earlier, I started to, I really like, this one and this one. So I'll buy the license for it. And, and then you would advance your show, and you'd say, okay, I've got to have this bundle. Like if it was a one-off kind of show, got to have this bundle, and please install these 8 extra plugins, because I'm going to bring my key and I'll license them and all that. And then you get to the show, you have 35 minutes to do a line check, and none of this stuff's on the console. So you're like, okay. So then you start banging away at inserts on your console, all the hardware, or the the inserts to the wave stuff or whatever it is. And it's like, I'm not going to have time to make this work. So I started to get to the point where I would kind of have 2 show files. I'd have this is the one when I'm touring and I know I'm going to have this stuff every day. And then I would have the other file that was all onboard stuff.
Yeah.
And, after a while I was like, well, I seem to do pretty well without the plugin. So that was kind of where that started. But there's just so many plugins out there that are tools, and they're not just something crazy and fun, and but they actually will color a sound a certain way, a vocal mic, or give it more of an analog kind of feel. And so there's some great stuff out there. But for me, I think my favorites are, I love the PSE, the Waves primary source expander. I keep throwing that on more and more stuff, and it just kind of works out. it's great for things like with Gwen Stefani, we have two horn players, and they put their trumpet and trombone down on a stand and play keyboards at certain times, walk away from them. And one of them is sitting pretty close to the drum kit, and just putting a noise gate on it never seemed to work well enough so that when he would pick it up and play it, I would not miss the quiet notes. But with the primary source expander, that always would let that through. And then I just started playing with transient shapers, which is kind of my new favorite thing to play around with. Kick and snare, and just adjusting the amount of attack versus the amount of decay on a kick and a snare. And it just kind of, I mean, you can go pretty crazy with it, or you can just subtly add a little extra crack on the front end and a little extra sort of shortening of the decay time and get rid of sort of a low-B sounding kick drum.
Yeah, when I first started messing with Transient Designer, that's when like my toms all of a sudden started cutting more. Like I can really just make them just sound like cannons.
Yeah,
I use that one a ton.
Yeah, it's a very cool one. And then as far as the Universal Audio, their stuff just sounds really nice. And the LA2A and the Distressor are my two favorites that I've played around with those. But again, I actually took I guess it was just one live rack out on Frampton this last year, and I put an LA2A on the bass group and did a crush group as well on the bass. And after about a week, I said, you know what? It's adding something, but I've also got these SSL compressors on this console. So I ended up just kind of going, why even set this up every day? I've got everything I need on board. So
yeah, I know I haven't messed with the SSL much. There's a few companies here in town that have inventory for rent on the SSL. Like I know Morris and Spectrum have some, but the bus compressor on the console, is it kind of like an emulation of the G Plus console compressor?
That's a great question, actually. Because when you look at a Waves SSL bus compressor, it looks like visually the actual thing, and on the console, it doesn't have that same exact look to it. But that'd be a great question. Maybe someone listening could answer that, because I'm not sure exactly what it's modeling, but it feels like, a good old analog SSL bus compressor.
Yeah, just a big old glob of glue.
Yeah. Yep. Put it across the left, right, and just touch into it and get a little makeup, and it's all good.
Mm-hmm. So, speaking of doing compressors on buses, that kind of leads into the next topic, is bus mixing. And I was going to ask you, how do you arrange your mix? And I know you've already said you're pretty straightforward, inputs, high pass, faders, output. But when it comes to like approaching a new band or someone you may have never worked with, what are some of the key questions that you talk to the band or the production manager about and say, what does the show consist of? And then how do you start kind of shaping your layers or your mix paths in your brain to kind of like what you want to do from scratch?
Yeah. So many of the bands I work with are kind of straight ahead rock bands. I haven't really been challenged with anything lately where it's like, okay, we use tons of, you have to use these plugins and we have to group things in this way and have a lot of kind of crazy routing. So my sort of philosophy actually is to go into, like, I'll usually ask for a multi-track of the show, and I'll try to get my hands on the console that I'll be using, and spend a week or so with it, kind of getting a mix together. But I almost always start off straight preamp to main left right, without any grouping, without any parallel busing of any kind, and then I sort of wait and see as I go along Is there something I need to be controlling a little better here? Can I do that? Can I use some busing to make that happen? And so, those conversations with the band, I haven't really had that conversation too much. Like, is there anything I should be doing out there differently than just mixing it the way I hear it or the way I feel it?
Yeah, gotcha. Well, I know, not using buses, then, once you get the left, right good, then I guess that's when you would start dialing into like matrices for like front fill,
right,
like delay fills and stuff like that, and then kind of fill out the room.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, that works. So I'm going to jump over here real quick because we do have, let's see, one question. It's from Brian, and I can't tell on my screen if that's an I or an L.
Brian Isley.
He says, "Hi, Jim. 2 questions. Can you talk about the keys to working with an artist and the importance of work ethic? And then number 2, can you address the key in having a lead guitar solo cut through the mix?" So it's a twofer.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's my good friend Brian Isley. He is awesome, and he works for a big company in Philly, and I actually got to do a corporate gig with him finally last year.
Oh, cool.
But we are good buddies. We actually worked together on my first rock and roll cruise, which was called the Rock and Romance Cruise, and Brian was in charge of all the video stuff on that, and I was mixing Mr. Frampton. Okay, so can you the keys to working with an artist, importance of work ethic? Well, yes.
Massive importance.
Yeah, be a good person. That's like, first thing first, just treat people well, be nice to stagehands, respect your boss who's paying you and all the people that work for them. And work ethic is kind of a no-brainer for me, just in the way that if you love what you're doing, if you love your job, it's not hard to do an 8, 12, 14-hour day on tour and put your all into it and make sure you didn't skimp on the tuning the PA process and getting a great line check in and being ready for the show and, staying rested and all that stuff. It's really easy to have a good work ethic, I think, if you just love getting up to go to work every day. And then he says the key in having a lead guitar solo cut through the mix. Well, one thing is leave a lot of room on the fader. Don't have your chunk guitar, your rhythm guitar at +7 on the fader, and then the solo comes and you only have 3 dB left, to go. But yeah, I used to work with a guy who kind of ran his faders actually like all around -5 because he loved guitar solos. So when the solo would come up, he never subtly did anything. He would just grab the fader and bang it up to +10. Like it was a flick of the finger, that there, and then it hit the top of the fader, and that was the right level for the guitar solo. So, and one thing I do, and I talked a little bit about this in my first Talkin' Yak Live video, was about having kind of a solo bus. If we're going to talk a little bit about buses, just like, a grouping of like maybe a little bit of chorus harmonizing, a little bounce delay, and some extra fat EQ, like some extra low mid and maybe cutting a little high mid, and having that as an extra DCA on your console. So when you go for the solo, you can kind of bring up the dry one and get it to poke through. But then if it's if you're in an open air venue or a really dry sounding venue, you can kind of have that second DCA there that's going to add some fatness and some echo and, just a little bit of sauce to the solo. So that's about all I usually do with that.
Nice
One, Brian.
Hey, yeah, that was a good question.
I want to add one thing to Brian's too, that since I started working and talking with Jim, that he wouldn't brag about, because it is humility. I think the humility from Jim is evident with those that know him, and just the way he interacts with people. I think that's a huge part too. And your success is just the way you come across and your humility. So I know you won't brag about your humility, because but
That'd be
I'm
counterintuitive.
gonna brag about it for you, and then we can move on.
I mean, you would never ever hear me say that I got to mix Van Halen. I would never say that.
Right. That's just not who you are.
Yeah. I mean, that's important, man. It's like rule number one, just be cool, right? Like you can accomplish a lot just by being cool. I did one of these last week with Chris Miller, and someone asked him, like, what's the key to like breaking out of your local venue and hitting the road? And he was like, just talk to people, man. Just be a cool person. Just be a human, because at some point you're going to be sleeping with 12 people in a bus, and you're going to be their family. And if you can't get along with your family, doesn't matter how good you are, man. They're going to go to someone who's maybe not as good at you on mixing, but they're a better person. Like 9 times out of 10, it happens all the time.
Yeah, I got a few audio buddies out there, Mr. Baz, who are just have this huge heart, and they just help everyone all day long. It's like, do your gig, make sure you've got everything covered, but they're just there to help out if somebody else needs a hand. And I don't know how many nights when we were Frampton was out with Steve Miller, Baz was working for the Steve Miller crew, and he would help us coil our snake up at the end of the night. That was totally not his gig, but he would help us do that because he just that's just the guy he is. And when you're that kind of person, people want to have you around. Exactly to Chris Miller's point.
Yep, exactly. All right, let's dive back into the techno mumbo jumbo here. Talking about PA tuning for a minute. I know you mentioned this is like one of your most important topics. How do you start? I know you mentioned it's all about timing, tuning, and optimizing, but like as far as where do you start? I know you kind of gave me 3 bullet points, but I kind of want you to talk about where you start, and if you tilt the room, or just kind of your general PA tuning methods, I guess.
Yeah. Well, like I said, so many PAs are so much just more linear than they used to be. Used to be that you would tour around, and especially if you were doing one-offs, a lot of festival shows and county, state fairs, that kind of stuff. You would show up and you would just before I used Smart and did a lot of measurements, I would just kind of turn the PA on, have a listen. I'd usually just do a quick little pink noise left and right and see how, and some days you'd be like, whoa, and it still can be that way. I mean, I've gone into some venues where they've done a lot of tuning, somebody who works there or whatever has said, I've got this PA dialed for this room, and you start listening and you're like, oh my gosh, that's just really bad. So, okay, where can we start undoing things, having said that, if the PA sounds good out of the gate, you're a lot of the way there. Usually I'll take a front measurement, sort of bottom third of the PA, one near front of house, kind of middle of the PA, if we're talking line arrays, and then something near the back of the room where that's sort of getting the top third of the PA. And so I'll store those 3 traces. And, I work very closely with my system guy, and, a lot of system guys will tune the PA for the engineer, and I'm a real hands-on guy with that. I like to be involved. So, so we'll start talking and what do you think about this? I'm seeing a lot of 200, 250 everywhere. So let's take a little of that out. And so we'll kind of do that. We'll get the main PA sort of roughed in, and then I'll usually go to subs after that. And this is where I could talk all day about subs and mains. But, like I said to you, Kevin, I'm not a big fan of massively tilted PAs, tons and tons and tons of low end. And a lot of them are all sort of that's the preset these days. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you can almost leave the subs on the truck for some events. You know, and they sound great. They have huge, big, round, low end, but you know, you really have to then amend your console file to fit into that sound of that curve of the PA. So with my system guy Carter Hasselbrook last year on Frampton, we worked really hard on coming up with a sort of a way so the console had all that big fat sound and the PA wasn't so tilted. So it was sort of a more linear transfer from the way the console sounded to the way it sounded in the room, the PA not being the thing with all the low end in it. So we did a lot of that. So that whole relationship between the subs and the low end of the mains, I wrote an article for Live Sound that was called Crucial Crossover, and it was all about that whole just getting the subs to just be an extension of the low end of the PA. And, you know, talking L acoustics like the K2 and the K1, they go down so low and have so much low end in them that the subs can almost be redundant. And so, you know, getting them to work together and give you that extra headroom was more the goal than anything, because you could almost do the show without the subs. But and then same with side arrays, front fills, and all that. I try to very much just add in what's missing, and it's usually sort of low, mid to highs. A lot of the low frequency in the sides and the front fills is already there with from the main. So so I will do. I won't go so far as to say I do much high passing anymore on those things, but I'll use the tools of the system software to tailor down the lows in any of the other zones.
Yeah, the software just keeps getting better and better and better too.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I mean,
it's
now
phase coherent the way you're doing
Yep.
things instead of just hacking away with a big EQ curve.
Yeah, been there, done that. So let me ask you this about some of your current gigs. I know we talked about the three main ones you're currently working with right now is Gwen, Peter Frampton, and Matchbox 20. How long have you been with each of those as their front of house?
So let's go back the furthest. So Matchbox, I was super lucky to get to take over that tour in 2004 from Robert Scoville.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks for going to do Petty. So, and thinking of me. So I got to do that, and then worked with him all the way up to 2008. Didn't do every tour, wasn't always able to do every tour with him, but I did a lot of stuff in those 4 years, and then did some Rob Thomas stuff as well, which is just so fun. Just such great musicians, and
they really are, man. That's what I was going to say.
Music. I mean, man,
it's so good.
The music is so good. And then didn't get to work with them for a while. And then they did a sort of, first tour in 6 years kind of thing in 2017 with the Counting Crows. And so got to mix that with Matchbox. So much fun. Gwen, I just started last year, actually. 2019, started doing her residency in Vegas at Zappos at Planet Hollywood. Super fun, great sounding room, really good D&B J rig in there, and Ichico SD5. So really, and again, just a really good sounding band. And you're going to hear me say a lot, like, how can I fix my mix? Tell your band to play better.
Yeah, right. Can't fix hands.
I'm telling you, and then that'll lead right into Frampton, because my God, that band, I mean, I would, and especially like I said, using the SSL on that and a K2 PA. We had a K1 K2 combo PA with Steve Miller, and last summer we took out a K2 PA. And yeah, it was like I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't EQing hardly at all, just high passes and good gain structure, and just turn it up and I mean, his guitar rig is just absolutely insanely good sounding, 8 inputs worth, but all working
Oh.
together. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, does he just have a bunch of cabinets or
He's got
mics on them?
Yeah. Nope. Just one mic, SM56 on a left, center, right cab, Marshall cab. And then he's got 2 Leslies behind that.
Oh, well, yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Low, high left, low, high right. And then he had last tour, he had a little Vox amp blowing backwards. And we had an 8th input on that. But, I mean, I'm the kind of guy who goes along and checks phase, delay time with all of these mics in the same area, and I never had to do any of that. It just, he just purpose built that rig to sound massive, whether you're standing right in front of it or bringing those inputs into a console. It was all just really figured out, and, and he's just a wizard on the guitar.
That certainly helps.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. Well, that's cool. I'm sure that's a ton of fun.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
If
that band will make you look really good doing nothing out there.
Yeah, just pushing faders. Well, I mean, it makes it easy, but it's also like, it gives you something like, because then you kind of sit back and you're mixing and you're like, what can I improve? And then at some point you're just kind of like, I'm just gonna let them do their thing. Like there's so many engineers that are always like, well, I could tweak this and try this and tweak this. Just sometimes you just gotta let the music be the music, like, and when you get a good band like that, it really makes it easy.
Absolutely.
My next question was going to be, what's the most challenging thing about mixing some of your current artists? And obviously it's not the band, because all the rock and roll guys you mix, even down to Van Halen, like those are all incredible musicians. So I mean, what is the most challenging thing about bringing some of these acts to mix, if it's not the band?
Right. Well, I'm going to throw some scenic designers under the bus a little bit here, but
it's cool.
We're all audio guys here, except for Jared. I saw Jared. Jared's he's Frampton's lighting guy. He's tuning in here, and but he knows how to work with audio guys, and he's a good dude.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some silly set designs these days. Everyone's got to be on a 75-foot walkway out in front of the audience, and it's and then there's sometimes so many video and lighting elements in the design that the PA can only go way over there. It's kind of like in corporate world. We want to hear the presenter like he's standing next to us, but your PA has to be 175 feet apart.
Yeah, well, it's funny, if you look back 20 years ago, it was all PA.
Yeah.
And maybe you had some iMag. Now it's all iMag and content, and then you got to fit the PA where you can. It's almost done this big flip-flop with as much content as they're putting out.
Thank God, like I said, the PAs have just improved on a massive curve, so we're able to have a lot less of it and have it sound, a lot better than it used to, at least throughout the venue. Some people still miss the 100 S4s, Claire S4s aside, the thump you would get out of a kick and a snare and all that. There's nothing like it, but it didn't sound the same everywhere in the room. So we're a lot better at that these days. Long walkways, I would say, are a silly thing. And then I think more than anything, when you work with really great bands, I'm gonna give some kudos back to the set designers and stuff now, and the lighting people. These shows look great. I mean, they look amazing. I remember getting I asked the Gwen camp, do you have a video of the show? I just want to kind of watch it. Maybe a camera placed at front of house. I can just kind of watch the show going in. And I remember 10 minutes into that show in Vegas, watching it, I was like, oh my gosh, this looks beautiful. Like I better bring my A game to this show, So I would say that's part of it. People they expect really, really good results, and some of the rooms we work in are not always set up for that. So you have to be able to really do a great job and rise above the acoustics sometimes, because the show looks great and people paid a lot of money for it. So you better do well.
Yeah, true that. Regarding starting from the rhythm section, we get the sound a lot every time we interview engineers, but your approach to drum sounds regarding mics and placement and, any kind of EQ compression you put on there. And I know, speaking to you last week about this, your number one thing was A, having a great drum tech who knows how to tune the kit. And then, of course, B, having a great drummer. But, what are some other secret sauce, kind of insights you can kind of put to how you get your drum sounds?
Yeah, I always want the option of 2 kicks. If the drum kit and just the input list that I walk into, because sometimes I'll take over on a tour and it's already up and running, and but when I took over on Frampton a few years ago, they only had 1 kick drum input, Telefunk and M80, great mic, but it was just that 1 channel, and so I just did a double assignment so that I had some separate EQ, and I kind of always EQ my 2 channels if it's 2 mics or a double assigned input. I'll EQ them to kind of be like the sound of a kick out and a kick in, the old 91 B52 combo. One's the inside one's kind of snappy and a little more tight on the low end, and then the other one will have a big round low end and not so much on the high end, and then I'll just find the blend of those. And it's super, super important to pay attention to the delay time between those 2 inputs and or polarity. If you're splitting an input into 2 channels, the polarity is never usually really an issue. But if like I'll boost a little 45 or 47 hertz on the one I call out, and then maybe boost a little 60 on the one I call the in. And just that difference of frequency boosting will cause a little time offset. So I'm always playing around with the input delay on those 2, and, doing it in a nice pair of headphones and then some near fields and getting all that figured out before it ever goes in the PA. And then snare, we were talking about this just before we went on, my crazy snare 3 that I stole from
snare 3.
Snare 3. So do you want me to bring that up now? I'll just
yeah, go ahead
real quick. Okay, so this is just some crazy EQ that I stole from Mr. Sean Deely, Lunchbox. Okay, so you've heard me talk this whole time about just doing everything really straight ahead and normal. This is my one detour right here.
Yeah, this is your double snare mountain.
Yeah, so this is a wide a Y of the snare bottom mic. So here, let me show you. This would be my regular snare bottom. Let me select this here. And that's sort of, I still do a little boost on the lows and highs, but then the one I call snare 3 is just a Y of that, a double assign. And so when we had Frampton, Matchbox was out with Counting Crows, Sean Deely was mixing the Crows, and he had just this massive Def Leppard-y, big fat sizzly snare drum. And I'm like, how are you doing that? And he goes, well, I have 3 inputs and, various amounts of compression and things like that going on. But it always sounded just super thick with this beautiful, like snarey sizzle on the top. And this was the EQ that I stole from him when he wasn't looking. Yeah, that's one of the only things that I sort of do that's kind of strange. But I'll on a particular day, I'll kind of take the snare top and listen to it with the snare bottom standard, and then I'll uh, take that out and put in the snare 3 and see what's working better. And honestly, I almost always use snare top and snare 3 are my two go-tos now. And then Tom's pretty straight ahead. I do like a little boost. I try to find that root note, the one that wants to sing in the room. So like if it's a rack tom, it's usually 120, 130, and I'll just pan around a little bit. I usually use Smart too to just kind of look at what the input is sending. What's the actual mic hearing? What frequency? And it's usually 121, something like that. And I'll just do a little boost there, then a little cut of some of the boxiness, 300, and a little attack, 4 or 5K kind of thing. And I'll go through all the toms and just kind of do a little boost that way. And then, so if, like I said, if you got a great drum tech or drummer who tunes the kit really, really well, and any of the great drum mics that are out, there's so many good mics now.
Ton.
And, overheads, I think, are the one thing, depending on the type of band, you can get a lot of cool stuff out of overheads. If the music sort of fits that. But yeah, I'd say the only other thing that I do that really helps out a lot is I'll do 2 reverbs on the drum. I usually do like a quite short little gated verb, and then sort of a more standard room or hall verb, but it's only about a second long at the most. And so one of them kind of gives you that quick little, and the other one's got a little breath to it. And then the combination of those two things together on the snare toms is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I've seen a few people do the dual reverb thing, and when you get the blend right, I mean, it sounds like you're in the best room ever.
Yeah.
And really trying to tailor those overheads in, because there's so many people that are afraid to use overheads in small venues because they're like, I'm going to get so much cymbal bleed. Mm-hmm. Well, if you can really be coy about the placement of it, you can really pick up more of the kit. And I think people are just really like afraid to experiment with it.
Yeah, it's a fun thing to play around with in rehearsals if you have the time. Those are, because you can try 2 or 3 different placements and get the best thing. But it is tough sometimes to get that, to get the sound of the kit without just getting crushed by cymbals, so.
That's true. And then, so what Jim was talking about earlier, I'm going to make sure when we're done with this, I'm going to link his channel below if it's not linked already, but he did a really in-depth thing with the 2 kick drums and kind of, muxing those 2 channels. So I'll make sure to link that below, and y'all can go check that out. And make sure you give him a like and a subscribe.
Yes, please.
Because I think you'll be putting out some more videos, correct?
Yes, as long as Patrick doesn't take his console away, I'm going to.
I promise we will not take it away. Scout's honor.
Yeah, I plan to do some more Talking Yak Live videos soon, and I was talking a little bit about this before we went on about getting a little house of worship sort of centered mixing school going in the Greenville, South Carolina area, Charlotte, Atlanta, sort of in this little pocket of the country, and was planning to do that at the end of September when Matchbox finished this summer. And I was going to hit the ground running with our school called the Mix Institute. And you can check that out, mixinstitute.com. And all it basically says on there is we're going to announce workshop dates soon. And then all this happened with the coronavirus. So don't know when any of this is really going to be able to happen, but excited to do some of those workshops. And I think in the meantime, I may do some videos actually ahead of the workshops, just because that's what we can do now. I was always planning to do the workshops first and then provide the people who come to the workshops with a video version of that kind of reviews everything that we did. But we'll get it out there one way or the other, but I want to do some of those as well.
Well, cool. Yeah, make sure you let us know when it gets kicked up, and we'll make sure we give you a big shout out and a share
Awesome.
next time we do this, and send some people your way, since we are here in the Southeast.
Yes, all very close together.
Yeah, we can funnel some people your way.
Hey, speaking of here in the Southeast, I had a question come in from a buddy of mine over in Seneca, Chad Rollins.
I see that.
Talk about, do you sidechain your kick and bass? And then he just threw another one on there. So, we can take them one at a time if you want to do that.
Cool. Yeah. Well, the second question I see, do you use and can you offer some tips on utilizing compound reverbs to create ambient space outdoors? I think we just kind of talked about that a little bit. I think that's what he's referring to. Just two different flavors of reverb. Sometimes it's cool to have that little gate that's sort of really tight and has maybe a little high mid kind of, shot to it, Phil Collins style. And then sort of a richer reverb. And that really does help outside because I'm telling you, these PAs are so accurate and so they sound so good and so much like your console mix that if your console mix isn't great, it is really, you really hear it outdoors. So
yeah, and it's dry as a bone outdoors too.
Yeah, have some stuff ready, whether you use it indoors all the time or not, but just have some nice vocal stuff ready. And then I do not sidechain my kick and bass. I will probably play with that during these lab days I get here with my D-Live C1500 here in Yak Sound Studios, Anderson, South Carolina. But yeah, that I've been reading a lot about that, and I just did it like a whole day of playing with kick drum bus compression. I watched Pooch's video that he has out on YouTube. And I'm like, yeah, I've used this before, but I'd never really have noticed that it did anything worth going through the trouble live in a big PA. But let me see if I can kind of, utilize that now in a closed, controlled environment like this. And then maybe I'll try it next time I'm in a PA again. But I haven't tried sidechain kick and bass, so gonna give it a go.
Gotcha. Okay. Now there was another question that I missed come in, but this revolves around being a good human. But what do you do when management, and then the second follow-up question is, a manager or wife behind your back telling you how to mix the show? That's one of my biggest pet peeves when they're like, I can't hear the guitar. And that's my husband. I'm like, okay, well, it's the group. So, how do you shuffle that around?
Yeah, I actually did a two-parter in Live Sound International about that. The first one was called Mixing for the Boss, and it was not about Springsteen. So it was about the boss or the wife of the boss or the managers of the bosses on stage, when they're offering their mixed tips and, the council, the committee, the mix committee out at front of house. It can be tough. I think if you do your job well and you represent the band the way they sound on their records, or at least, it really helps if they had a live album out. And if you ask the band, hey, how did you like your live album? Oh yeah, it came off great. Well, then what they are looking
what
for.
they want to hear.
Yeah. But I worked for a band that had a manager who did not like low end very much. And I mentioned this in the first Mixing for the Boss article. And he would just come up and start harping at me about how much low end and sub there was. And I kind of had to say, that's just what people want these days. It's, the PAs back in the 70s and stuff couldn't really do that. And now we have all this coherent, just awesome sounding low end, and that's what people expect. So, I'll take some advice at front of house if it's, and there's been times I've said, oh yeah, no problem, I can do that, but if it's detrimental to the way I think the band should sound, then I'd rather just have that discussion offline at another time,
Absolutely. I know I mixed a show for a guitar player, Colonel Bruce Hampton, I think was who it was. I think he had a really big following, and he came through the club I was working at in Birmingham, and his hearing was starting to go. So, his manager was like, hey, can we make sure that there's no subs? Because it really just muddies up his hearing. He wants to be able to hear his guitar, and he wants to be able to hear the band. And I was like, yeah, sure, not a problem. So I cut all the subs off, and we just had like the KF 650s in the room. It sounded great. And of course, people started coming up, and they're like, man, what's up with I can't hear the kick drum or the bass. I'm like, well, it's by their request. It's what they want, And they're like, well, this sucks. I'm like, well, you're not paying me to run sound for you, but I want you to have an enjoyable show. But I was like, I'm just I'm doing what they asked me to do. And the band was super happy. They thought they had a great show, and it really comes down to you gotta mix for the boss, man.
Yeah,
100% of the time, every time.
Yeah, and I've worked for a couple bands that were really skittish about low end as well. Just didn't like it rolling around on stage, and so in that regard, I would say, there are some things we can do now, cardioid subarrays and just careful planning, implementation of where you put the subs. I'll fight really hard in theaters a lot of times. Like, I do not want to put these subs on stage. Can I put them down on the floor? Can I fly them? Can I do anything else but put them 8 feet from where my boss is going to stand, and it doesn't always, you can't always win that, but at least there's some tricks. I mean, the first time I ever used a cardioid subarray with 3 Meyer subs and just turn the center one around backwards and put it out of phase and added 2.5, 3 milliseconds of delay. And I was like, oh my gosh, where has this been all my life? So, if you can do things like that to still have a great result up front, but help the band on stage. And one big thing I think gets ignored a lot is, the low end that comes off the back of speakers. And, it's tough with your mains. Like, a lot of the line arrays now are just so much better for that. There's not a bunch of 160 to 400 coming off the back, but it's all the other things, the fill speakers. Front fills are notorious for having all this low frequency, low mid stuff blowing back. And then all of a sudden the guy comes out playing an acoustic guitar and it's just like, ooh, it's going crazy. And it's not often the main PA. A lot of times it's the front fills. So Carter and I on Frampton, I would actually go up after we were doing our walk around and tuning the PA, I would go up on stage and just have him mute the mains and everything else and just listen to what was coming off the back of the front fills. And we would go in there and pull some more 200, 300, 400 hertz down until they sounded like they weren't going to be problematic. And then usually when you turn the main PA back on, they sound just fine down there. They still have plenty of warmth. But that's what I'd kind of say to a band that's, maybe doesn't prefer certain things on stage. Maybe you can still get it out of the PA and still make them happy up there as well.
Yeah, true. Because there's so many people now doing in-ears and side fills, and some people do in-ear, side fills, and wedges. So like the monitor guy he's got his hands full. Right. He really does. I have the utmost sympathy for those monitor guys. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say one word. Just don't do that.
Oh yeah, please. Yeah. Don't.
Pick one.
Just just ears. Boom, done. If you need a butt kicker, great. Those are silent too. But yeah, man, it really cleans it all up. So let's talk about virtual sound check. Most every digital console nowadays has virtual sound check by way of Waves or Dante or some other, MADI. Do you use it, and how do you use it?
Definitely use it. Have been using it as long as I have technologically been able to use it. And it's getting tougher with all these consoles running at 96K. And, I just did a tour where they had 80 inputs and the console was at 96K. And I was like, oh my gosh, man, I need, 2 Waves MGB devices. And, I was using Waves Tracks Live, and it was a lot of inputs that had to be patched and checked and all that. But no, definitely use it. I love it. I spend a lot of time with it before I ever walk into the first like full production rehearsal with the band. Actually, you guys were Patrick, you were talking about Clemson earlier. So they have an SD5 at their theater in Clemson. Mm-hmm. And when I found out I got this Gwen Stefani gig, I was like, oh, what console do you guys have in Zappos Theater? Oh, an SD5. And I'm like, oh, great. Man, I don't know anyone around here who has one, so I can build a file. So I got a multi-track. My buddy Eddie Kaipo, who does monitors, sent me a multi-track. And I went in and asked around, and the guys from New Spring were like, oh yeah, they have one at Clemson. Let me make some calls and connect me. So I got connected and was able to go out there for 2 or 3 days and spend 4 hours and each day and just kind of dialing up a mix. So I use it a lot in the beginning, just from somebody else's audio files, and then on tour, I'll often use it as a touch up. So before it ever goes in the PA, I'll sometimes just listen back to the relationship between the kick and the bass. Like, is there something that's been not to my liking in there? And I can do it in headphones and really fine tune some things. And then I'll usually just run like one song through the PA with it. Especially if the band is a band that doesn't come in for sound checks, I'll definitely at least run a song just to feel how the PA is working. But I spend more time, I think, with it with headphones, just fine tuning stuff outside of the PA environment. Yeah,
that's a lot. Just fixing little tiny things, while you don't have to have them on stage, has been the biggest use of this. Because I think as well as I do, a lot of people that try to use virtual sound check for an actual sound check, as soon as the band comes out, depending on how much adrenaline they've got going, their dynamics will either be through the roof or it'll be totally calm. But at least you get a really good starting point, which is a huge help, instead of just coming out there blind or coming out like a festival and having 30 minutes to do everything you need.
Right.
So let's talk about experiences. What are some of the most fun and unexpected things you had happen on tour? And I'm sure you have just so many good stories, but if you could narrow down like your top, 3, maybe we can go there.
Okay. That's tough. One of the funnest things, if you guys have ever gone to like a NAMM show or AES or any of those shows, and I haven't got to go to one of these for many years now. It's at that time of year when corporates are kicking up and all this stuff. So, but I remember one time, this was before I really knew Robert Scoville. We were both asked to go to an Audio-Technica dinner. I got my Audio-Technica headphones on. Nice. We were both using their mics a fair bit on our shows, and they asked us to come. And man, the stories, I mean, that guy has some great stories. And you get around anyone who's been in the biz a long time, and there's just great stories. And the collection of people in a group of 5 or 6 audio people telling stories. I mean, Jared, our lighting guy, probably doesn't want to hear any of these stories, but because we always, end up geeking out about audio. But I think the coolest thing that one of my favorite memories, and I had mentioned back in high school, kind of getting a bug for listening to music and thinking, man, I just want to figure out how to do that, and the band that really got me going back then was Queen. I was just a massive Queen fan, and their
They've had a
albums
resurgence here lately too with the movie.
Oh, I know, it's so great.
It's great,
man. I needed a box of tissues during that movie. I was just, it was such a great movie. Just the way they shaped me wanting to be an audio engineer, and how the cool effects, and just Brian May's tone, and just all the, just all the amazing, like the drum sound. I got to say, actually, I just opened up yesterday, guys, on this C1500. I opened up a multi-track with some stems, but I got it back in like 10 years ago, and I upsampled it to 96K, and it's Killer Queen, like the tracks from Killer Queen, right? Like so many people have these things. I don't know where they came
I had that one in Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah,
and
it
used to drive me nuts because Bohemian Rhapsody was like 24 track.
Yeah.
And then you'd listen to like vocals, and then like later on it would be drums, and then it would be like something else, and you're like, how do they even like?
So I pulled this up yesterday, and I'm just goofing around and building a file, and I just downloaded Logic. I'm going to try Logic out, the big 3-month free trial of Logic right now. Yeah. So I was playing with that, and I turn up there's like 6 drum inputs on this multi-track. There's kick, snare, tom, and room. I think that's it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just turning those 6 mics up, oh my God, it's
all they need.
It's bombastic. I mean, it's the biggest, loosest sounding open drum kit ever. Anyway, I'm getting off track. So anyway, I just always thought their album sounded so great. So it was around 94, and I had mixed my so my first Van Halen tour was 91, and I did monitors. And then in 93, the front of house engineer left, and I got an opportunity, and I petitioned hard, and I got a chance to mix 5 shows at front of house, and they were going to give me an A or a D-, and that was, going to be my chance. Right. So I got to mix front of house in 93 for first time for Van Halen. And then in 94, a band who loves Van Halen, Extreme, was looking for a front of house guy, and I got the gig.
Wow.
Off of a cassette tape of a board mix. I got that gig.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Double wow.
Yeah. And so we're doing this massive festival in Europe. It was such a great show, really cool. I walk backstage after the show to say hi to the guys in the band, and Brian May is standing in the dressing room talking to Nuno Betancourt. And I'm like, oh man. So they knew how much of a huge Queen fan I was. So I just kind of I ambled up like this, next to Nuno, and just kind of stood there. And he's like, oh yeah, you got to meet Jim. He's a massive fan. And he's like, oh, very nice to meet you, Jim. Mix was bloody brilliant, mate. He said something like that. And that was it. Just
that'll do it.
Yeah. And then the follow-up to that was a year later. We were playing again. I was back with Van Halen. We were doing a thing in Wembley, and the BBC was doing recording the show for a later broadcast. So we didn't have a studio guy in the truck. So we were just using the BBC guys, and they were doing a great job. But I ran out during sound check from front of house backstage to the truck. And as I'm running out to jump in the broadcast truck, Brian May and his wife are walking into the gig because they were going to hang out that night. Had no idea they were coming. He comes walking by me. I'm running, and he goes, "Oh, hey, Jim." This is a year later. I met the guy for 2 minutes, and so definitely one of the coolest things to ever.
Yeah,
happen.
hearing you have a good mix from a certified astrophysicist who also happens to play guitar in one of the biggest rock bands of all time. I would definitely check that off as number one in my book.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the better moments of my life for sure. And then the other crazy, unexpected, weird, oh my gosh, moment was in '91. I'm doing Monitors for Poison, and we're in Reno. And David Coverdale and Jimmy Page were up in Tahoe recording the Coverdale Page album. David has a house and a recording studio up in Tahoe. So they're like, "Oh, Poison's in town. There's got to be, lots of fun people at that show. Let's go hang out." So I'm on stage left in Monitor World. And all of a sudden I look up, and here's David Coverdale and Jimmy Page standing right next to me at the monitor board, and Jimmy Page kept getting closer, trying to get a better look at the stage because he was blocked a little bit, and he's falling into my gear, like seriously falling into my racks of gear. And I'm like, Mr. Legend, Mr.
Yeah,
please
could you please not put your drinks there?
Exactly. So all of a sudden they come out, and the backline guys show up with a guitar for Jimmy, and I hand David a microphone, our backup microphone, and all of a sudden they're ushered onto stage, and they start playing Rock and Roll, I think, by Zeppelin, and they start rocking out. Well, little did they know that we had kind of a strange stage configuration. It was a standard sort of 60 by 40 stage, but then they built a center thrust, a left and right thrust, and then a walkway down the front. So if you're seeing this correctly in your mind, there was two 12 by 12 foot holes in the stage, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Well, nobody prepped the rock stars for this. And Jimmy Page does one of his classic, guitar moves and goes,
oh no,
off the stage, head first, foot first, guitar first, into a hole in the stage. And I have looked on YouTube for that video for many, many years.
Well, that was 91?
91, yeah.
Yeah, luckily, no one had a whole lot of these in the crowd.
That's right.
Otherwise, it would have been up on YouTube in a split second.
Yeah.
Was he okay, though? Like he
was
got up,
okay. And it was actually kind of a Spinal Tap moment, because before he came back out of the hole, and they had like cases and stuff. They actually did some guitar changes and stuff from those holes, so there was a purpose for them being there. But as he was coming out of the hole, the guitar just kind of raised up like this out of the hole, and the strings were all broken, and
no.
And so it was, and the whole time the band's still playing, nobody's realized that Jimmy's gone, Jimmy's down, so yeah, it was quite a moment.
That's wild. That is definitely those. Okay, so I asked you for 3. That's a pretty solid top 3.
Yeah.
In my book. So regarding your most fun, unexpected stuff. So we covered that. But here recently, what was your favorite tour as of recent that you've been on?
Well, I definitely love the 2017 Matchbox kind of reunion tour. Almost, it had been 6 years since they'd played together, and they were just having so much fun.
Oh, I have a question about that. The reunion thing. Their original drummer now plays guitar. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
And then who's playing drums for him right now?
Stacy. You just put me on the spot.
But
Stacy.
He was a lead singer, right, in another band.
Yeah. American Hi-Fi.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah, and he also is the drummer for Miley Cyrus. Stacy Jones, and he's awesome. He's awesome.
Oh, he's incredible.
And he plays so hard that and he doesn't really want to sing, but he'd be great. One of those drummers to have a mic back there because he sings so well, but he plays so hard. It would just be an extra hi-hat mic really back there. So,
right. Sorry, I didn't mean to get sidetracked, but yeah, because I remember I recognized him and he's playing guitar and I was like, wait a minute. Okay. Yeah. I started putting 2 and 2 together, but, they're both great drummers. They really are. But I mean, Stacy he was back there like a freaking freight train, with like a 26-inch kick drum or something. I think he had. It was just massive.
Yeah,
bigger than that maybe.
Yeah, it was. It was cool, and he's a great player. So, and then Paul is a great drummer, and he's becoming an amazing guitar player. I hate to say that way that he's becoming, but he kind of has said, I'm not really a guitar player. I just want to play guitar. I love playing guitar. Mm-hmm. And so when he first made the move out there, he was like, I don't know how this is going to be, Jim, but just do your best out there. But it's the interplay between the guitar players in that band is so fun because the songs are written with a lot of back and forth movement in the guitar rigs and stuff. So, and in my first Talkin' Yak Live video, that one was all about a routing, guitar channel routing to.
That's a good one.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. And so I play some Matchbox stuff in that video, Bent. And that song was one of my favorites for the bounce back and forth, the sort of needing to have the panned guitars or the left and right stuff during the rhythm. And then during the solos, having the ability to bring it back to the center. But yeah, cool band, really, really super, some of the nicest guys on the road. And the songs, the catalog of so many great songs. When we were doing rehearsals, I just kept going, oh my gosh, man, you guys just have endless great songs. So I really enjoyed that one. And then last year was Frampton's finale tour. So that was pretty special. Nobody wanted to see that one end. We just wanted to keep on going. And we were going to do some more this year. We were going to do Europe and postponed and
thanks to the neighborhood friendly virus, right?
Yes
It sucks.
So we do have a question, Jim, that you might want to answer. Sammy or Roth?
Oh boy.
Ooh, I don't know if he's allowed to answer that.
No.
Who oh, Tommy.
Is that one of your guys' friends?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of our guys.
Okay. I can answer this fairly because I've only worked with one of them. So I've never done a show with David Lee Roth. So
there you go.
I was there for the Sammy years and he was great. I just saw a video that he put out the other day with Michael Anthony, the nicest man in rock and roll, Michael Anthony. Mm-hmm. And oh my gosh, they were doing I can't remember what it was, but Sammy, I looked it up. He's 72 years old and he is singing like he's 25. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, he's great, man.
Yeah. And super, super nice guy and funny, super funny guy.
Yeah,
so
pretty, he's got to be chill too. I mean, he like lives on the beach.
Yeah.
He has his own tequila, Cabo Wabo, man. Like, come on.
Yeah. We did a little, like the whole crew from that 91 Van Halen tour. We all were texting last night, which is so bizarre, but because it was Cinco de Mayo.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There you go.
So Rob Kern, the production manager, who was the drum tech at the time, he shared a thing with all of us, all these photos and, oh my gosh, man, we did the second year anniversary of the Cabo Wabo. We went down there and played.
That's cool.
So we did a 1 hour, 15-minute show and it had 5 days on the beach. So not a bad deal.
Totally worth it. So we're gonna land this plane here.
Okay.
And I've got a 2-part question for you. So what other engineers have inspired you to change the way you mix? And then if you could give other engineers advice on how to get started? I know we kind of touched on that at the beginning, but just kind of like a closing out expose, if you will. But like, what are some other engineers that inspired you to change the way you mix? And then what's some good advice for other people looking to get out on the road and get some mixing under their belt?
Yeah, cool. I mentioned Lunchbox, Sean Deely, and his Cool Snare 3.
Does he have like an online channel or resource or anything?
You know what? He actually works for Sweetwater now. And we actually just talked a few days ago because I was looking for some tracks to mix for some of my videos. And Telefunken has an awesome resource. Have you guys ever checked that out?
I haven't.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm going to blow it, but I think it's called Live from the Studio or Live from the Lab or something like that.
It's just stems that you can mix.
Yeah, it's pretty decent amounts. You know, they have some that are just kind of singer-songwriter, and then they have I grabbed a Candlebox tune, which is probably going to end up in one of my videos soon.
Oh, that's cool.
And I reached out to the folks from Telefunken and said, "Is it okay if I use them in my videos?" But so we, me and Sean were just talking about that a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, he just is the super cool organic mixer. Like I'm as straight ahead as they come, but he had an even more organic. You know, he was using a Studer live console and some cool tube stuff, hardware and software, and it just always had this big, you know, cool, warm. It was a great mix with the Counting Crows. So I definitely was peeking over his shoulder a lot, just kind of seeing what he was doing with stuff. And then Cubby Colby, Rob Colby, who's a legend. I got to say real quickly, when I first came to the States in '86, I got hired by DB Sound in Chicago. I was this club mixer, and Harry Witz took a chance on me, and we had a mutual friend up in Vancouver, and I came down, I started working. And one of the first people I met was Cubby. He was prepping to do, I think, a Prince tour or something epic. You know, he did Genesis and Phil Collins and Janet Jackson and all these like just amazing people. And he was a legend. And I was this young, like 24-year-old getting a chance to work for this big sound company. And I met Cubby and, you know, asked him all the silly things you would ask a legend like that back then, you know, and didn't see him for many, many years. And then we worked together on Journey. I was doing Journey and he was mixing Pat Benatar. So we got to work together again. And he's that guy who's on right before you, who is mixing so good that you're like, every night you're like, oh God.
Yeah, you're like, oh,
I gotta be better somehow.
Yeah.
And it was cool because we had kind of a different style. I sort of had it sort of a little more sheened and sort of album sounding, and Cubby just had these just crushing drums and killer, you know, Pat Benatar and Neil Giraldo guitar and stuff. But so Cubby definitely. And then Frampton, we got to do a show, 2 years ago now, I guess, with Journey and Def Leppard up in the Sky Dome in Toronto, which was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I bet that was fun.
Oh my gosh, what a great show. And when Def Leppard came on, I was like, oh my gosh, who is this guy? Like, and I didn't know Ronan. I actually have never really met him. I kind of, you know, gave him a thumbs up as I was leaving, and I never even really got to meet him very much that day. But Ronan McHugh, that's one of the best mixes I've heard in 10 years plus. Like,
wow.
I don't know if you guys saw that show recently, but
no, I missed it when it came through here.
I love going to see a show, and the sound is so good that you're like, you know, you just can't wait to get on a PA and a console again so you can be better, you know?
Mm-hmm. I've definitely been there. Like, I took my wife is a massive Lady Gaga fan. I took her
Oh,
to go
cool.
see her in Atlanta at whatever the big arena is in Atlanta. And you know, she'd always wanted to go, and we finally got the chance to go, and we got great seats, like right by the stage. And I was sitting, right in front of the big hang. And so, she comes out of the stage in the middle, and I look over at my wife, and she's crying, and then the band comes in, and then like I almost start crying because the mix and the PA sound so good, you know what I mean? And then I was like, I got to figure out who's mixing this, like who the front of house engineer is. Lo and behold, it turns out to be Chris Raybold.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
so like, I got to pick his brain on a few things when we would run into each other at sound check. But it was just like, when you hear something like that good, and you come into it with like not that high expectations, and then it just blows you away, and you're just like, I got to get back to the lab. I got to reverse engineer this and figure out what we're doing. So
Yeah.
I've definitely been there.
I love it. I mean, that's the way it's supposed to be, and that's probably a good segue into, your last question. What advice would you give other engineers on
Yeah.
how to get started? Well, first of all, just love it. Don't get into it because you want to go on tour or because you think music is cool and you just want to be in the music business or something, like those are all great thoughts, but if you want to be an audio person, you have to definitely just embrace that and passionately love it. I was going to be a pilot or a tennis player back in 1980 when I graduated. And all of a sudden I'm in recording school and then I'm on the road and I'm like, man, I'm never turning back. This is it. This is what I want to do. So, if you can, take that passion and actually do the job and survive these days, which is getting tougher for all of us with everything being shut down. But I would definitely say, have that attitude first. And second of all, get some education if you can. Back in, in the 80s when I was starting, there wasn't much. I mean, Mix Magazine had a little segment on live sound. There was hardly, there was the Yamaha sound reinforcement manual and things like that, but there wasn't tons of stuff about mixing, and so I would try to read whatever I could, but and then the schools started to happen. I remember living in Orlando for years, and Full Sail came along, and these schools, there some can be expensive, but I would never shy away from some good education, some even just watching videos and stuff. We've all been doing that. I mean, I've been watching all kinds of Chris Lord-Alge videos at home.
Yeah, there's a trove of information, and someone on Reddit actually put together a list of all the active YouTube accounts with free content. I'm going to link that below because I saw your name was in there. This channel's in there. I mean, there's so much information, and it's all available for free right now. So we'll make sure we link that below.
Yeah, that's cool. That's definitely, one way to get education of, a formal school of some kind. Fantastic. The other ways, I would say, like you said, get the fire hose, just dive in and go, just start, doing what you can. And then, the other way is interning, at a church, be a volunteer, be that awesome person who's always helpful. One thing I find when I work with a lot of interns or volunteers or people who are just learning is you're there to learn. And so learn and observe and listen, and don't ask too many questions because the person you're asking questions to probably has a gig to do and they're trying to concentrate. So, be kind of quiet and be a sponge and take it all in. And, just because guys like us like to tell road stories, they don't always want to hear what the cool thing that happened at the club the other night. We all have stuff to do, and get ready for sound check and all that. But if you can help out at a small sound company and do, summer shows and, get your hands on gear, learn how to install software, learn how to test through a PA system from microphone to speakers, and how to pack a truck, and just get your fingers in all of that stuff. I'd say that, and the combination of schooling, and just mix any band you can all the time, any chance you get.
That's the best way. Well, man, that was some great advice. You've shared great stories, great tips, great tricks. I just want to say thank you so much for giving us an hour and 33 minutes of your time today. Really working with us over the past week to put all this together and bring it to some people who gave up their afternoon to watch.
Yeah,
Jim, thank you.
Thanks
very much.
You got it. Patrick, thank you so much. I'm actually moving, Patrick. So even if you tried to get this console back, you wouldn't. I won't be at the same address. So
you're telling me I don't know where to find you now?
That is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay.
That's funny. Well, we'll make sure we have Jim's channel linked below. He already has 2 great videos up there right now. He's doing more. So make sure you go like and subscribe to his channel. Great content. I watched all the videos. Even my wife sat down and she was like, "Oh, I've never thought about that before." So it's great content. I highly suggest you ingest that content as often as much as you can. And then Patrick, thanks so much for joining me today. You can tell we're all working from home here. As Patrick had a couple unannounced guests, which are always welcome.
They're setting up a bounce house going into a swimming pool at the moment. So little nervous, a little scared. But
oh, that sounds like it could be a good day. But Alan Heath said, go ahead and keep that C1500 for a bit if you need it, Jim. Jeff said it was okay.
All right.
You got the clearance from the big boss.
He way outranks me.
Wow. Well, cool. That's great. I'm just gonna keep on playing with this stuff and finding new and fun things to check out. And like we were talking about, this is a great time to just, woodshed and quarantine mixing sessions, just trying stuff you'd never try before. And, one thing I said, I'm going to try and figure out how that Phil Collins sort of inverse gated reverb thing works. I'm going to figure that out.
Master that. Yeah, that's what we call quarantone.
Nice. Yeah. And my wife, a little credit to my wife, they were having quarantinis the other night.
Oh, fancy.
It's the drink of choice when quarantined.
Yeah. I know we have a friend that started dating a new guy and she was so excited and I was like, "So is he your quarant thing?"
Oh.
So come on, man. I got dad jokes on deck all day.
Dad jokes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, thank you guys so much. Jim, thank you. Patrick, thank you.
Can I throw one more thing in super fast?
Absolutely. Yeah. What you got going on?
I just want to say a huge thanks to the Live Sound International folks, Michael Lawrence, Keith Clark, and for letting me write articles. And so if you go to Pro Sound Web as well and just search for my name, every article that I've put up there is there. And I just really appreciate being able to help out and help pass on some of this stuff that was passed on to me. So
that's great. I'll make sure to link the Live Sound International link below too, as well, to all your articles and their stuff. And then also, when you said you want to thank the Live Sound community, I think all 3 of us would say thank you to everyone that's out there right now that is mixing live sound. I know you're not working right now. Stay strong. You're going to be back on the road in no time. I guarantee it. Everybody's going to get ready to get out there, and you're going to make them sound good. So thank you guys for all this. And with that, I think we're going to go ahead and sign off.
Awesome, guys. Thanks again.
Have a great week.